Hello, music fans who like metal, rock, and prog music. I heard 9 albums that came out on November 1st, 2024, and I want to give you my first impressions of them so that you can find some interesting music to check out and explore. Starting with, I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with Beardfish, their album Songs for Beating Hearts. This is the 9th album by this Swedish band. Actually, the first 3 that I'm going to talk about are all kind of Nordic European bands. So it was a good week for Nordic European music. Uh, Great Swedish symphonic progressive rock band, some hard rock, and almost metal influences at times, but not really a metal band. But they're a great band. Before this album, I'd surprisingly never listened to an album by Beardfish in full. But I did hear great things about them, and the singles I heard from this album were all excellent. So I was looking forward to this. One minor criticism I have about the album is I don't think they should have split the epic out in the open into 5 tracks. It should have just been one. Because of that, I'm going to have to disqualify it from being on my best prog epics of the year video at the end of the year because I decided to only include epics that are truly 1 track in that video. But otherwise, besides that decision, the album is excellent. My favorite track on my first couple listens was the single In the Autumn. I think it has a yes reference around the 4-minute mark after they say, and I think that the answer is yes, and they follow it by a riff that's similar to a yes riff from the song Tempus Fugit from the Drama album by Yes. It's the part at 137 of Tempus Fugit that reminds me of that part in the autumn. And then they also reference the Eurythmics song Here Comes the Rain Again, where they use the lyric, talk to me like lovers do. Since hearing this album, I've gone back and listened to a couple other Beardfish albums, and so far they've all been excellent. So this is definitely a band for me to keep my eye on going forward as well. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out Beardfish and Songs for Beating Hearts. And I'm putting that in my excellent tier. Next up is Vola and their album Friend of a Phantom, also in my excellent tier. This is the 4th album by this Danish band, and this is progressive metal. It's got a bit of gent, some alternative rock, some post-metal, art rock, and pop, all influenced in there. And I enjoyed the early singles from this one as well. They're a pretty accessible band. It's very catchy progressive metal, some borderline rock radio vibes, but there's enough interesting rhythms and style shifting to keep it sounding fresh, unique, and sophisticated for prog fans as well. Even though you could imagine these songs being on the radio. The opening track, Cannibal, features Anders Frieden of In Flames. It has an awesome, catchy chorus and just bouncy, groovy guitar riffs. Most of the vocals are clean, but Anders delivers excellent harsh vocals on this track in his guest spot. One of the riffs that starts just after the 3-minute mark is so syncopated and awesome. It just reminds me of Tesseract grooves. And this album inspired me to listen to a couple of the earlier Vola albums, which are also excellent. So another band I'll be keeping my eye on going forward. That sounds good to you. Check out Vola, Friend of a Phantom. Next up is another one that I'm putting in my excellent tier. It's Isbjorg with Falter Endure. This is the 2nd album by this Danish band, another band from Denmark. 2 in the same week. I don't listen to too much music from Denmark, so it's actually kind of surprising to have 2 excellent albums from Denmark in the same week. This is more maybe neo-progressive rock. It's got a bit of alternative, got some metal influences, maybe even, dare I say, a little bit of like emo, even like post-rock vibes in here. And I heard the opening track of this album, Ornament, ahead of time and liked it, so put this album on my list. My favorite track after 2 listens now is Solitaire. There are some nice odd time rhythms, and the melody and the vocals are just beautiful and emotional. And I know I love this album as well because shortly after I heard it, I wanted to listen to their debut album, and I also love that too. So Another band I'll be keeping my eye on, that's Isbjorg with Falter Endure. And now we'll go to my very good tier. So these ones aren't quite making excellent. There were no near masterpieces or masterpieces this week. But in my very good tier, I've got Rosalie Cunningham with her album To Shoot Another Day. This is the third album by this artist from the UK. It's psychedelic art rock. She's a great singer-songwriter. She was previously a member of Ipso Facto and then of Person, but now Rosalie Cunningham performs as a solo artist. The opener of the album, To Shoot Another Day, sounds like a James Bond song. The second track, Timothy Martin's Conditioning School, is a really fun track. It references the Happy Birthday song at one part of the track, which is kind of fun. And then the third track, Heavy Pencil, is an awesome track that starts with this bluesy chord progression, and it gets 11 beats per bar at the beginning. Then the verse comes in, it's mostly 5 beats per bar, this funky psychedelic vibe. Then it goes into some parts that are 7 beats per bar featuring the flute. And this album overall is like a mix of James Bond music, Broadway show tunes, the Beatles, Jethro Tull, and the B-52s. If you kind of throw that into a blender, it makes a really interesting sound, and that's what Rosalie Cunningham's done here with To Shoot Another Day. So check it out if that sounds good to you. And then also in my very good tier, I have Herin with Hiding in Plain Sight, the debut album by this American artist. It's his first solo album, but he's a music industry veteran. This is progressive rock, and this is after 8 years of absence. He's the Tiles guitarist and songwriter Chris Herin, and this is his debut solo album, Hiding in Plain Sight. It's a conceptual work about his walk alongside his father's 10-year struggle with Alzheimer's. It combines prog and art rock influences that alternate from sophisticated orchestral arrangements to polyrhythmic complexity to cinematic soundscapes and ambitious guitar workouts. Herin teamed up with renowned producer Terry Brown, Grammy award-winning mastering engineer Peter Moore, which gives it a detailed and powerful sonic landscape. I heard the early release single The Darkest Hour ahead of time. I enjoyed that. If you're a fan of Jethro Tull, definitely check it out. It features Martin Barr and Dwayne Perry of Jethro Tull. And there's a lot of supporting musicians, guest musicians on this album that are some pretty big names. Really impressive and surprising that he got all of these amazing contributors on the same album, like Peter Frampton, Alex Lifeson of Rush. I mentioned Martin Barr, Dwayne Perry, and also John O'Hara of Jethro Tull, Michael Sadler of Saga, Kim Mitchell of Max Webster, Cody Bowles, I think is his name. I lost my spot in my notes. I got to read off all these guests. I'm not remembering them all. Where was I? Who else? Oh yes, Cody Bowles and Kevin Como of Crownlands, the amazing Canadian prog rock band that sounds a lot like Rush, and Jeff Coleman and Shane Gallas of Cosmo Squad, and Tim Bonus of No Man, Colin Edwin of Porcupine Tree, Randy McStine, who I might mention later in this video, also of Porcupine Tree, Kevin Chone, who's played with Tarja Turunen and Chad Smith, and then Matthew Parmenter of Discipline. So that's a lot of guests, and I don't even think I mentioned them all. And this is a really interesting album. After 2 listens, a standout track for me was The Heart of You, because the chorus of that song is just so catchy. I love the vocal harmonies. The song's just amazing. Even though the chord progression in The Heart of You is fairly basic, it reminds me of the Counting Crows song, Mr. Jones. Somehow, though, it's even catchier and better to me than that song by Counting Crows. It's not even really a prog song at all. It's mostly just a classic sounding alternative pop rock song, but it's just executed at the highest level. If the whole album was as good as that song, The Heart of You, I would probably actually put this in my near masterpiece tier. But there is some hit or miss throughout the album. It doesn't really have a consistent feel as the vocalists change up a lot from track to track. So it kind of sounds like almost a uh, compilation album instead of a like it's the same band. And since they have so many guests, I guess that kind of makes sense. But there is a little bit of a unifying thread here in that Chris Herin is behind it all. So there's some cohesiveness, but a little bit of variety and kind of a mixed bag in quality. But The Heart of You is amazing. Another excellent track on here is A Wrinkle in Time that has an awesome intro, some cool rhythms. So those are a couple of tracks that I thought were just amazing. If the whole album could have been at that level, this would have just blown me away. But there's some ups and downs throughout the album, so I'm just going to put it in my very good tier. Next up, the last one that I'm going to put in my very good tier is Dirty Loops with their EP Beagle. This is another Nordic European band. They're from Sweden, and it's kind of jazz fusion, really funky pop as well, some progressive rock in there too. And this is a band that I've never heard an album by them before, but I like the 2 early release singles I heard from this EP, put it on my list. It's just very poppy, accessible, funky jazz fusion. Their sound kind of reminds me of Michael Jackson and Bruno Mars and pop artists like them, but with more funk and jazz fusion added. The third track, Final Touch, has just an awesome bass line. That sounds good to you. Check out Dirty Loops and Beagle. And then the last one I want to mention in my video today is Randy McStine and his album Mutual Hallucinations, 4th album by this American prog rocker, guitarist, vocalist, and songwriter. It's a progressive rock album. I saw him play as a touring guitarist for Porcupine Tree when I saw them live. He did a great job. Heard good things about his music, though I hadn't listened to his solo material until now. And I think this is a good prog rock album. It didn't blow my mind or make me feel like I should return to it over and over again. So I'm just going to put it in my good tier for now. Maybe if I listen to it in the future, it'll grow on me. I think it's good, but didn't quite make it across the line to the very good, like on the level of Rosalie Cunningham, Herin, and Dirty Loops. And that's it for my first impressions of these. How many did I talk about today? 7? I think 7 albums that came out on November 1st. Have you heard any of these? What do you think of them? Let me know down in the comments. Did I inspire you to check any of them out? Which one are you looking most forward to hearing? And let me know if anything else came out recently in metal, rock, and prog that you think I'll enjoy. Stay tuned for the next video. There's some albums coming out on November 8th by Clone, The Pineapple Thief, Tungsten, Neil Morse and the Resonance, Make Them Suffer. And then there's a compilation of covers that are going to make up The Shape of Punk to Come, Obliterated. That's a compilation of covers of refused songs from that album of the same name. And then on November 9th, the Mommy Heads are releasing One Eyed Band. So probably shortly after November 9th, I'll make another video and make my quick first impressions of that. Maybe in between then, I'll do some random video as well on some random topic. I have all these topics that I want to make videos about. I just haven't had the time to sit down and make them all. So stay tuned. If you like metal, rock, and prog, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.